Trust is the foundation of every marriage, but what happens when that trust is shattered in ways you could never imagine? My husband made a decision that would change everything, one that left me questioning love, loyalty, and even myself. This is my story, and it's one I never thought I'd have to tell. My name is Emma. And for 6 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage. My husband was my best friend, my confidant, the man I could trust with my entire life, but everything changed the day his brother moved in with us. At first it seemed harmless, family, helping family during a rough time. I welcomed Michael into our home, never suspecting how his presence would tear apart the life I had built. What started as an innocent arrangement soon took a turn I could never have anticipated. My husband suggested something that left me speechless, something that blurred the lines between love and betrayal. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but as days turned into weeks I realized was deadly serious. This isn't a story about a single mistake or a fleeting moment of weakness. It's about how trust can be twisted, how love can be weaponized, and how the people you think you know best can lead you into the darkest places. I'm sharing this not because I'm proud of what happened, but because the truth demands to be told. This is mystery, and I promise it's one you won't forget. It all began the day Michael, my brother-in-law, moved in with us. His divorce had left him broken, and my husband insisted we offer him a place to stay until he got back on his feet. I didn't think twice about it. Michael was family, and helping him felt like the right thing to do. At first everything seemed normal. Michael was charming and funny, the kind of person who could make anyone feel at ease. He had this confidence about him, a sharp contrast to my husband's quiet and reserved nature. I found myself drawn to his energy, though I convinced myself it was nothing more than admiration. Michael quickly became a part of our daily lives. We shared meals, joked around, and spent evenings talking about everything from his failed marriage to my husband's work stress. But there were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, where his gaze lingered a little too long, or his hand brushed mine in a way that felt deliberate. I told myself I was imagining things. One evening after dinner, we were sitting in the living room. My husband leaned back in his chair, looked at me, and said something that made my heart stop. "Michael, been through a lot," he said, his tone casual. "Maybe you could help him feel better, give him what he's been missing." At first I thought it was a joke. I laughed nervously, waiting for him to smile or say he was kidding, but hadn't. He just looked at me with this strange calmness, like he was suggesting something as simple as lending Michael a book or making him a cup of tea. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged. "You know what I mean. You've seen how he looks at you, haven't you? He needs someone, Emma, and I think you could bet hat someone." I froze, my mind racing. Was this some kind of test? A cruel joke? But the seriousness in his eyes told me he meant every word. I felt a wave of confusion and disbelief. This was my husband, the man I trusted more than anyone in the world, and he was suggesting something I couldn't even begin to process. Michael, who had been sitting quietly on the couch, looked at me but said nothing. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but all I could do was sit there, my heart pounding as I tried to make sense of what was happening that night. I lay awake in bed, replaying the moment over and over in my head. I couldn't understand why my husband would suggest something so outrageous, so wrong, but deep down I knew this was only the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face. That night, after dinner, my husband brought it up again. We were sitting on the couch, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He turned to me, his eyes unusually calm, almost distant, as if this was just another casual conversation I want to share. "You with Michael?" he said, his voice almost matter-of-fact. "He's been through a lot, and I think this could help him. You're the only one who can make him feel better." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart stopped for a moment, and I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. This was my husband, the man I trusted more than anyone, and he was asking me to do something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I looked at him, searching his face for some sign that he was joking, but there was none. His eyes were steady, his expression serious. I felt a K.N. form in my stomach, the disgust growing with every passing second. How could he even think of such a thing? The idea of being with his brother, off letting him touch me, everything about it felt wrong. But deep down something else stirred within me, something I didn't want to acknowledge. There was a part of me that was curious. What would it feel like? Would it be as terrible as I thought, or was I overreacting? The thought lingered, and no matter how hard I tried to push it away, it stayed with me. The next day Michael pulled me aside. It was just the two of us in the kitchen, the scent of coffee lingering in the air. As he stood too close, his presence overwhelming, I could feel the tension between us, the electricity in the air. He looked at me, his gaze intense, like he was waiting for me to make the next movies. "Serious, you know," Michael said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "This isn't just talk, he wants it to happen, and so do I." I should have walked away. I should have told him to leave, to stop with the games, to end it all before it went any further. But I didn't. I stood there frozen, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel my body reacting to the closeness between us, to the way he was looking at me. I should have said no, but instead I nodded, me voice barely a whisper. "Okay," I said before I even realized what I was agreeing to. The moment the word left my lips, I felt a rush of shame, of guilt flood over me. Booty didn't take it back. I didn't stop it. He had crossed a line, and I knew there was no going back. The weight of my decision hit me then, and I realized that everything I had known, everything I had believed, and was about to change in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. At first it felt like a game, an exciting forbidden game that I couldn't resist. My husband seemed to think it was something that would bring us closer away to help his brother heal after his divorce. He encouraged it, even made jokes about it as if it was perfectly normal. It'll make us stronger as a family, he'd say, like this was just another part of our bond. But deep down I felt the weight off it, the twistedness of what we were doing, Michael and I began to spend more time together, and as much as I tried to convince myself it was harmless, something shifted. It wasn't just physical anymore. The lines between right and wrong began to blur, and I felt myself drawn to him in ways I couldn't explain. The flirtation started innocently enough, touches that lingered a little too long, a glance that said more than words ever could, but it didn't stop there. My husband, ever the instigator, would joke about it when we were alone. You two are good together, he'd say, his voice casual, if it was the most natural thing in the world, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes, the approval. He wanted this, and I wasn't sure anymore what I wanted. Then came the texts. At first they were simple, almost innocent. I can't stop thinking about last night, Michael would text, or you looked incredible today. My heart would race every time I saw his name pop up on my phone, and with every message the thrill grew stronger. It wasn't a secret affair. My husband knew everything, even encouraged it. But still the guilt gnawed at me. One evening, when my husband was out, Michael found a way to be alone with him. I tried to tell myself it was just a kiss, nothing more, but when his lips met mine it was like a switch had been flipped. It wasn't just a kiss, it was everything I had been denying. His hands on my body, his breath in my neck, it was all so intoxicating. I pulled him closer, and in that moment it felt like the world had disappeared. It wasn't just about the physical anymore, it was the power, the control, the fact that my husband had given me away, had shared me with his brother. It felt wrong, but at the same time it was the most exhilarating thing I had ever experienced. Every time I saw Michael, every time we shared a moment, I felt like I was crossing a line I couldn't come back from. My husband's approval only made it worse. The more we did it, the more I craved it. I wasn't just betraying him, I was giving into something darker, something I didn't understand, but the thrill, the rush of it all kept me coming back for more. It wasn't a secret affair. My husband knew he wanted it, and I was too far gone to stop. The lines between loyalty and betrayal, love and lust, had become so blurred that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began, and the worst part, I didn't want to stop. Soon everything started to spiral out of control. What had begun as a twisted arrangement, a way to help Michael, had turned into something far darker. Michael, once content with just being part of this mess, started to demand more. He wanted me all to himself, no longer content with the idea of sharing me with me husband. He would pull me aside when my husband wasn't around, his eyes intense, his hands more possessive. Why should he get you all the time, he'd say, his voice low and urgent. I'd serve more. At first I thought it was just jealousy, a passing feeling that would fade, but it didn't. The more Michael pushed, the more my husband began to notice, and when he did, everything changed. He wasn't just angry, he was furious. He accused me of betraying him, of turning my back on him, even though he was the one who had started this whole mess. He couldn't handle the fact that his brother wanted me, that Michael was no longer just the bystander in this twisted game. The argument started small, subtle at first, but they quickly escalated. They would fight over me, over who had the right to me, who deserved me more. It was like I was no longer a person, but a prize to be won, a trophy to be claimed. Me husband would shout at me, his face red with anger, demanding to know where my loyalties lay, but all I could do was stand there, caught in the middle of their power struggle, unable to choose. I had become a pawn in their game, a tool to be used and manipulated. My husband would tell me one thing, Michael would tell me another, and I was left to navigate the maze they had created. Neither of them seemed to care about what I wanted. It was all about control, about who could possess me, who could own me. The emotional manipulation was suffocating. My husband would guilt trip me, reminding me of the life we built together, the vows I had taken. But then Michael would step in, his words smooth and convincing, making me feel like I was his, like I belonged to him. It was like I was being torn apart, pulled into two different directions by the men I had once trusted the most. I wasn't a wife anymore, I wasn't a woman who had a choice. I was a prize, a possession, something to be fought over, and the worst part, one didn't know if I wanted to escape. I was trapped in their twisted power struggle, caught in the middle of their desires, and I didn't know how to get out. One night everything came crashing down. It was supposed to be just another night, another secret rendezvous between Michael and me. But this time my husband came home early. He walked an onus on me and Michael together. The look in his eyes was pure rage. He exploded, his voice filled with fury, calling me very name in the book. The words he hurled at me were like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. But what happened next was even worse. Du hadn't just turned on me, he turned on Michael. You were supposed to just borrow her, not steal her, he shouted, his voice shaking with anger. That's when it hit me, the depth of their betrayal. It wasn't just about me, Anna Marie. It wasn't just about my husband and me or my affair with his brother. This was about something much darker. They weren't just fighting over me, they were fighting over control, over power, over Who could possess me? In that moment I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. I wasn't just caught between two brothers, I wasn't just a woman torn between two men. I was being used by both them. They had manipulated me, twisted me into something I wasn't. I wasn't a wife, I wasn't a lover. I was a pawn in their game, a trophy to be won, and neither of them cared about me. They only cared about what I could give them. The accusations flew, but I couldn't even defend myself. What could I say? How could I explain that I was just as much a victim as they were? How could I tell them that I was trapped, that I had been pushed into this mess by their twisted desires? The truth was I didn't even know who I was anymore. I was lost in the chaos they had created, and there was no way out. In the end, I lost everything. The house that once felt like home, the life I thought I had built, gone in an instant. My husband kicked me out, his words filled with disgust and betrayal. "Get out," he said, his voice cold and final. "You're not my wife anymore." It felt like a knife to my heart. But I knew he had no right to argue. I had destroyed everything, and there was no going back. Michael disappeared after that as if he had never been a part of my life, hadn't even tried to explain, didn't offer any comfort. He had gotten what he wanted and now he was gone. The brothers, once close, once family, were torn apart. The bond between them was shattered, and I was the one who had broken it. I was Theon, who had set everything in motion, and now I was left with nothing but regret. It hot. I was in control. I thought I could handle it, that I could play the game without consequences, but I was wrong. I was just a pawn in their twisted game, a tool to be used and discarded. When they were done, I had no power, no control, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I had destroyed. If you're ever tempted to cross a line like this, if you ever think it's worth it, don't. It's not worth the pain, the heartbreak, the destruction. The consequences are far worse than you can imagine. I learned that the hard way. And now I have nothing left but the scars of my own choices. If this story shocked you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Join us tomorrow for another tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and scandalous secrets. Thanks for watching.